Welcome, thanks for coming. There's a lot of familiar faces, so this is great. I think many of you know that the Van Avery Smith Galleries host somewhere between 3 and 5 exhibitions a year. We typically show contemporary art, and our exhibitions focus on nationally and internationally acclaimed artists. We sometimes in solo exhibitions, sometimes as group curatorial projects. We also support faculty here, so sometimes you may come through and see a faculty exhibition, again, either a solo show or a group of our art faculty. And we also support the work of students. So if you come through the spring semester, you'll see our senior art majors have week-long exhibitions, each solo shows for their capstone. And then we have a group show that's not just majors, but anyone that may have taken a class can be presented in the Van Avery Gallery at the end of the semester. As Nina mentioned, we also collect work for the college, so there's about 4,300 works in our collection, and I'm sure you've seen the sculpture, but you may have also seen works all over campus. We have works, I think, in 50 locations on campus, including giving works to students, and it's a newer program where they get to borrow work for their dorm room. So today we're here to see Elizabeth Bradford's exhibition, and we're going to have a conversation with Elizabeth. My facilitation is just that I'm going to tell you what the program looks like. So first we'll hear from Elizabeth. She'll run through some images, some older images, some works that you'll get to see in person as well, these newer works that are in the exhibition. Then I'm going to introduce Carla Hansel, and we'll invite both of them here to have a little moderated conversation, and then we'll go into the gallery where we can look around, and you're welcome to stay as long as you'd like. I want to first introduce Elizabeth, but before I do that, I want to recognize our main sponsor for the exhibition, which is Wells Fargo. The Wells Fargo Foundation found out that we were working on this exhibition with Elizabeth, and they made all of these extra kind of amazing things possible that we would not have been able to do. There's some beautiful letterpress, like a poem with a drawing from Elizabeth. There's a few of those left in the gallery that were given away for free. This amazing book is thanks to Wells Fargo. We were able to get some amazing writers, an interviewer for Elizabeth, all the works beautifully photographed and designed by an incredible designer. These are free. I am telling folks, because we're a little low, if you live locally and you think you're going to be coming back, it's great if you can wait and pick yours up, but you're also welcome to take that today. And then Elizabeth brought some posters also, so there's some of those out there for you as well. So thanks to Wells Fargo, they threw an amazing party last week.
Maybe that where I can do that.
Yes, yeah, so after we leave the auditorium, there's some snacks and some coffee that you can have. That's best if you have that in the atrium, and then we can head into the gallery. And there's some chairs set up in the gallery. We may chat in there, we'll see, but it's really an opportunity for you to look closely at the works. So now I'm going to introduce Elizabeth, and then you can come up and chat, and then we'll reconvene. We'll get Carla up here in a bit. So Elizabeth Bradford studied art at Randolph-Macon Women's College and the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and at Charlotte and at Davidson College. She's participated in artist residencies, including ones at the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts in Amherst, Virginia, and Moulin-Oneuf in France, and the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, among others. Her solo exhibitions include those at the Cameron Art Museum in Wilmington, the Blowing Rock Art and History Museum in Blowing Rock, the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, and Hood College in Frederick, Maryland, among others. Her works are included in many museums, corporate and private collections across the United States. And we're excited that that will include our collection soon, once we decide on which work. Also thanks to Wells Fargo. So I'm going to invite Elizabeth up now, and then we'll hear a little bit about your work and your practice.
Thank you. here. Can you hear me? Do you need this? You do. You need it. Okay. Thanks for being here. Thanks for taking time out to come this morning. It's my pleasure to be doing this show. I thought I'd kind of shake things up. I've sort of given the same talk several times, so I thought I'd shake things up this morning and try to put the work you're going to see in the gallery, the work you have seen in the gallery, in context of 50 years of making art. So I thought I'd start by telling you about the 70s, the late 70s and the early 80s, when I was young and just started out and moved to my great-grandfather's farm here. And so my first subjects were the farm. And this is a tiny little drawing from the 70s, done in colored pencil. For many years I worked only with colored pencil, which is very pale and soft and has to be just gone over and over and over again to make it have any strength. So this is just a super early image from the farm. And these aren't necessarily the best images, they're just the ones I stumbled across and thought, oh boy, that will work. And I had a crummy camera and shot this myself on the front porch, so they're not great shots. This is the barn. For a while I taught school, and every single day that I didn't have to teach school, I tried to make art. This was a snow day. They called snow day, and I was on it. So this is the snow falling on the farm that day. The laundry was, for a while, an interesting topic, and the barn, which is now my studio, seen through the laundry. All these are just images from the farm. And this is an image from the farm that's in the show. So the farm's been a consistent subject for me. This is from right about the time COVID struck. I was working on this. The rain had fallen, and this red bud tree had these millions and millions of seed pods, every one of them just studded with raindrops. And then the rain was falling around it. And so I decided, I'm going to do that. And it was just dazzling. The actual thing was dazzling. So I spent most of COVID trying somehow to get the dazzle into this painting that anywhere came close to the natural thing. I never felt like I hit that mark, but by golly, I tried for months and months and months. At one point, I had the raindrops. They were falling vertically, and I decided they were too static. So I painted out every raindrop and painted them all back in on the diagonal. And every single one of those little raindrops that's sticking to seed pod has probably been worked over about 6 times. And then for a while the background was light, and then for a while the background was dark. And this thing has been through 1,000 iterations. Sometimes it's just like that. Sometimes things fall off your hand automatically, and sometimes they take 2 years. This is from the mid-80s. In my community, I started to spread out from the farm and try to chronicle the lives and the farms of the people in my community. When I moved there were still people farming on land that had been in their families for generations. To this day, there's still 13 or 14 original families still on their land out there. A lot of it's been sold off and changed hands, but there's still a bunch of us. And this is a neighbor's garden. She only liked blue flowers. I think most of them have faded, but this is, every flower in this garden was blue. So that's, I had switched by this point from using colored pencil to using gouache, which is watercolor that's opaque. And it looks very velvety and flat, and I was just completely intrigued with it. So for about, maybe as long as 10 years, all I used was gouache. And I started doing watercolors that were 5 feet long and 3 feet tall, and just using that material. But I don't know if you can tell how kind of flat it is. It's a beautiful velvety quality. So this is one of the gouache pieces from the community. This is another one. A local farmer, a neighbor, actually a remote cousin, used to crack me up. His wife was this brilliant self-taught horticulturist. And he was had a farm background, and they had a small farm on the edge of town, and, they would plow it up in rows, and then they would plant rows of stuff, and this is like a row of sweet peas. And I always loved the way they grew it like it might be corn or beans or something, or soybeans. They grow flowers like that. So I would get these people to let me come and hang out and try to capture the way they were farming. And I'm so glad I did, because they're all gone now, and I have these wonderful little pieces of memory, these recordings. And the cool thing about painting something is you have to observe it really deeply. So in a way, you own it forever. You've been as deep as you can go into a thing. You've looked at it as carefully as you can, and you kind of retained it. And so it's like you have a lot of real estate up there in your mind that you've carefully thought about. And this is another person. See the blue road? That's after a while I started taking little road trips to look for subjects. So I would just get in the car, put the kids in the back seat, hoping they'd fall asleep, and I would just drive for miles and miles. And one day I was cruising through the backside of Huntersville, and I came around this blue curve here and saw this, and I made friends with this woman. I didn't know her prior to that, but I about wrecked the car when I saw this. She grew flowers, and this elderly lady, and would haul them into Charlotte to the Myers Park Farmers Market on the weekend and sell them. So she had this poppy, this cash crop of poppies growing in her yard, and it just knocked me out. So this is like 5 feet long, 3 feet tall, this rendering of her garden. She's long gone.
Do you remember the name of that street?
Excuse me?
Do you remember the name of that street?
It's Ransom Road.
Yeah. I know that well.
It's Ransom Road. And she was Miss Sally Ransom, one of the original settlers in that part of town. They owned a lot of land out there near Rose, whatever it is now, Rosedale or Rose.
Bless her heart. She brought joy to a lot of people, didn't she?
She sure knocked me out. I wish I owned that. I don't know who does, but I wish I did. This is a blurry, bad photo I took, once again, a road trip. I was on some road outside of Chapel Hills on my way to visit my mother, and so instead of taking interstates, I love to take secondary roads. Mostly my phone is set for avoid highways. So this is a place, a crossroads called Eli Whitney. It's in the middle of nowhere, sort of west of Chapel Hill. And I just loved it. It was this barn, and I loved that the road said stop. For me, that was like really profound, because I really wanted the world to stop. I really wanted things to stay the way they were. And of course they didn't, but for me that stop was crucial. And it's one more road trip. And this is another road trip up above Statesville. This is super old. I think maybe 1978 or something. I got really fascinated with the way farmers would plant in stripes. There'd be a fallow stretch and then a planted stretch, and then it would roll over the hills and create these great contour lines. So I had an obsession with that for a while and did a number of those. And you'll see that reappear in a minute. Anyway, I just thought it super beautiful and voluptuous and sensuous looking. This is a roadside painting from the show. I had to be up at Virginia Tech for an art thing, and so I decided I would take unmarked roads home, and I just try to get lost. But the nice thing is now GPS will help you get found. So I just took the craziest route I could possibly conjure out of Virginia Tech, and on a cold, dreary January morning, and I saw this. And I love of course I love the patterning of the limbs and stuff, but I love the way the birds pattern the sky. Pattern's a serious long-term fascination of mine that's gotten sort of more intense in recent years. But yeah, just a road trip painting. This is another road trip. It was a dreary winter, and I had zero subject matter. everything just looked bleak. So I took a road trip up to Old Fort just to cruise the creeks and the back roads. And this was a icy creek I found that day up near Old Fort. And then there was a period, like about the time I was 50, I went into this deep self-exploration, and I did this sort of oddball collection of paintings that stand out as different from what you see in the show. But they were real self-exploratory, and not always completely understood by me. Really the best stuff, the artist seldom understands in the time you're doing it. And sometimes you're working beyond your own ability. And you may start a piece and have to park it because you're not good enough to finish it. And come back to it 6 months later when you are good enough to finish it, and then you finish it. You've learned enough in that 6 months to be able to complete the piece. But anyway, this is called, I was in a dark spot, but this is called Attaining Hawk Spirit. I was on a road trip, a hawk flew right up in front of my face, right up to the windshield while I was ripping down the highway. And I just thought, oh, that says something to me, I'm not sure what. But anyway, hawk spirit. And then I did some dreaming self-portraits, a whole bunch of little 12 by 12 inch paintings about, this was about being a mom. My kids were growing up and leaving home, and I was feeling some nostalgia about that. I was reconnecting with what it felt like to be the mother of a baby and a little kid. And flight was showing up in my dreams a lot, flying. I had a dream where I was flying my baby around, and my baby was amazed that I could fly, and I was like, no, I do this all the time. So this is a painting about that dream that I kind of conjured up. And then this is a piece, the Mint Museum owns this. Carla Hansel, who is here today, was the curator of modern and contemporary art there at that time. And she chose this painting to belong to the Mint. It has, as you can see, those same furrows in the background, the same earth and plantings. And I'm flying again. And there's a hawk above me whose shadow is cast onto this white dress, and then the white dress becomes invisible, and you see the landscape below through the dress. So it's, it's like, I don't know what it is, but it is. And I love it has the little, I call them Monopoly houses down there, little like in your Monopoly game. I like just they're like symbols of dwellings. They're not dwellings, they're symbols of what a dwelling might be. This is also, I think, about loving the land, wanting to hover it over in a protective way. And the idea actually came to me in the yoga class. I was at the end, you do Shavasana, and I'm there doing my Shavasana, and I start to feel like I'm floating over the landscape. And I did an actual painting, small painting of me in my yoga clothes, floating over the landscape, and then translated it into this larger, more elaborated image. The tricky part was painting a self-portrait with my eyes closed. Because I didn't know what I looked like with my eyes closed. So that was kind of tricky. But otherwise, this one, it's the exact height of me and the exact width of my shoulders. So I did a series of paintings during that period that mimicked my human scale. This is another one. Clearly, this is a painting about freedom, sort of on the flying thing, but one of those many, many small square self-portraits I did. And then one day I was driving my son into Charlotte at 8 o'clock in the morning for a test he had to take, and I passed the garage sale. And in the yard was a kayak. And so after I dropped him off, I went back and said, what do you want for that kayak? And they said $25. I said, sold. And I'd never kayaked before, and I bought it and took it home and put it in the water, and it was so ergonomic and it felt so second nature to me that I became addicted to kayaking. So this is some years later, it's just about the sort of reverential, meditative act of kayaking. I love that the sky, I always love it when the sky is inverted and the trees appear upside down. I mean, that's kind of fun. So I like the sky on the ground, or, at our below us.
Are
So
you
that's-
still working in wash there, or?
No, this is acrylic.
That is,
Yeah, I stopped wash at about 1994. I just went completely and wholeheartedly into painting in acrylic after that. The wash had to be framed, and that's expensive and fragile and heavy and hard to deal with. This is just much more tough, and you can sort of schlep it around, and it's fun. So this is a kayak. The next few pieces are all done from the vantage point of my kayak. I go camping frequently down at the Pamlico Sound. And when I did this, I had just gotten back from India like a week before, and went down to the Pamlico Sound to kayak. And so I like to think that this painting is really reflected by all the stuff I saw in India, the patterns, the colors, the extravagance. And you get to play with water like that and let it be crazy. I mean, it's a perfect place to install a lot of abstraction and to play freely. So this is Pamlico Sound kayaking piece. It's another kayaking piece from a place called Merchant's Mill Pond, where I go to kayak a lot. It's an old mill pond in the eastern part of the state, Hoke County. And the trees are really crazy and distorted, and then so therefore the reflections are real distorted. This one has like a mandala in it, built into it. I didn't realize that until it was pointed out to me by somebody else, but it is. And at one point when I was teaching, I got my rowdy teenage students to do mandalas. I explained to them how to lay them out, and they were the most difficult people to corral on earth, but it was so crazy. Once they started working on this mandala, the room was dead solid for an hour. You could have heard a pin drop. There's something that speaks to our subconscious about that format, I believe. And so it appears in here as a meditative thing. This is another kayaking piece that has kind of a stained glass effect. I was in the boat, I looked at this little bank with these trees, and the sun was behind them and coming through. You'll see it better in life than you can see it in this picture. But the limbs appeared black, and then all the other color was just brilliant with the light shining through those yellows, autumn leaves. So it's kind of plays with stained glass as an inspiration. It's another kayaking piece from down at Little Tidy. If you see a painting and you're in the water, then more than likely it's a kayaking piece. If you're in the water looking at the land. So this is a tiny sketch. I did a whole bunch of little 8x10 sketches. They're all done on site within the space of about 2 hours max. Maybe 1 hour, maybe 2 hours. But this one, I was camping at Cumberland Island, and I thought, well, shoot, I'll just paint my tent. So I did. And these are, at one point, maybe about a decade ago, I started backpacking with some buddies of mine who are super experienced backpackers. I'd always camped, but I hadn't felt confident to do ultralight backpacking. So they schooled me in how to do that. And one of them is a biologist. So we go to these places, and it's like this intensive biology school. And he kind of is the leader. He figures out where we're going to go, and we usually base it on the appearance of a specific kind of firefly, or there's always some thing we're seeking. So we were down at Cumberland because I whined that I wanted to go there, and it's real beautiful too. But so these are all these are little tiny 8x10 pieces that are done on site while camping. They are pictured in the book, but not in the exhibition. And this is, I went camping on an island by myself one time, a few years ago, and I stayed behind a dune. This is the dune I slept behind. And this is from another place in the mountains I camped. This is when I went camping and it rained. So this is through the flap of the tent. And another sort of tropical place.
Elizabeth, what's the clay panel?
A clay panel is like a piece of masonite, and they put this funky coating on it. It's kind of fragile, but it makes it almost like you're doing a fresco. You touch the paint down and it just soaks in. And you can't really move it around like you can on a canvas. It's like a lot like fresco. And I kind of love that weird interaction with the material, so I kept using these clay panels. They're fairly delicate, like if you knock the edge, you can chip it off, but I just like it. So, and I haven't sold these, I've kept them all. I call them my diary. So this is another camping piece. This is called 23 Stream Crossings. We went on one trip where my friend said, we're gonna cross a lot of streams, so you better be prepared. It was cold, it was April, the water was icy. So I was like, oh God, it's gonna be terrible. So I did, it really is like they say, there's no bad weather, just bad gear. So I went searching for the right gear, and sure enough, I found it and was able to cross 23 streams without freezing. This is one of the 23 streams. And this is a camping trip upstate New York, where we were camping on a lake, and it was beautiful until one day it rained, and then I just realized it was otherworldly. Everything was socked in with fog, so all you could see was the water, the little plants sticking up, and the raindrops, and I was like, whoa, that's so wild. And that's in the show. This is not in the show, it's another camping water study. The camping got me into this water thing. I always loved painting water, but it really got ratcheted up when I was sleeping beside streams and crossing over streams.
When you see these things, do you take a picture, or do you make a quick drawing, or do you just remember all this?
I don't remember it. I take not one photograph, but many. None of them are the product of one-to-one copying a photograph. They are construction based on synthesizing a number of photographs, often from different points of view. And sometimes the result is logical, and sometimes it's a little bit illogical. But the hardest part of it all is synthesizing all that information into something cohesive. Yeah, only the little clay panel ones are directly from nature. And these are all constructed in the studio, and they're mostly huge, so you couldn't take them out anyway. They're too big to haul around, they don't fit in my car. So, actually this one's not huge, but a lot of them are. Like Lake Lala, I think is 7 or 8 feet tall. This is not in the show either, but it's from the last couple of years. And then I started sort of getting fascinated with thickets and weeds and briars and native plants, and started just being intrigued by stuff that grows naturally, stuff we didn't have anything to do with. It was here before we got here, and hopefully it'll be here after we're gone. But just tracking and studying these things. I like the way these thicket things kind of replicate the complexity of your own life and all the stuff going on in your mind. It's a tangled web. And this is one that is, these are paintings where I've settled into one location. The next few are all pretty much from the mountains, from kind of a quiet, isolated location where I would go looking for images. And this one is just about, at this particular moment in my life, I was super joyful. And this is just really a painting about joy. More than it is a painting about plants, I think it's just a painting about joy.
I noticed that was another large one, 60 by 48.
Yeah.
I bet that's spectacular first.
You're gonna see it, it's in the shop.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah. And this one, I was at a residency and so I went poking around in the woods and found a tiny creek. And it was just, you know, it was like a former cow pasture, so it just had all kinds of brambles and briars, and you could barely beat your way through it. But I devoted the residency to try to evoke that. It's just a puddle in the middle of the pasture, like the sky being on the ground. It's fun. And I love those red berries. I think they're invasives, but they're so cool looking. Just another walking down a country road, and literally this was all happening in 3 square feet. You know, it was you can't see from where you're sitting, but and from this slide, but there was a Scotch thistle with like 7 bees on it, and then there was that Joe Pye weed that had a monarch on it, and all that stuff was just right there, like in this tiny microcosm. And you know, the minute you paint a butterfly, that sort of puts you into a questionable category. So you gotta kind of slide it in there quietly and not make a big deal out of it. I didn't want it to be a painting about a monarch. It's not a monarch, it's something else, but just wanted to kind of slide it in there, just sneak it in there.
Elizabeth, so how long would it take you to create that?
Some things, you know, I work a 40-hour week, so it might take 2 weeks. But like that burn thing with the red bud and the raindrops, I think I worked on that for over a year. Not every day, but I would just haul it out every week and hack away at it.
I was just curious because you see so many 2022, 2023, 2023. It's like, how, and they're huge.
Yeah, I'm usually working on 4 or 5 at a time. And I'll be like painting grass blades. And I'll think, if I have to paint another grass blade, I'm gonna lose it. So then I'll switch over to painting something else.
You're so human.
But I usually have about 5 that I'm nursing along. But some of them, I guess if I just went at it every day, 80 hours, 120 hours, something like that. I don't really keep track. It's just time.
Maybe, I think we can.
All right, let me flip the. All right, these you're all going to see in the show. They're just more of that same place in the country where I could just kind of study stuff. And this one has 11 butterflies in it. You have, it's like a hidden thing. You have to find it. But these are all just, you'll see them in the show, so we don't need to belabor that. And if you have questions about them, just ask me in the gallery.
Do you start from the background or the foreground?
I start from the foreground. I usually start with the thing that to me is the subject, and then I paint the world around. That's the way I think. Okay, so. Ryan.
Right, we're making our transition here. Where can you all be that this will be in your face?
Bring us close to the light.
I was gonna roll this. I'm gonna introduce Carla real quick.
Which one? The light.
All right, we're transitioning
All
here.
right, we're going back to another.
You wanna hear me? It's gonna be our background.
Hello.
Okay. So I want to introduce Carla Hansel now. Carla is an independent curator, public art consultant, and cultural planner. For 5 years, she served as the vice president of public art at the Arts and Science Council, which partnered with the city of Charlotte Douglas International Airport, and Mecklenburg County to incorporate permanent works of art into capital improvement projects. During her tenure, over 36 projects came to fruition. She led a team of 3 project managers and convened the Public Art Commission, a 9-member board that approves artist contracts and oversees the artist's benchmarks from design to installation. And I was on that committee for part of the time, and I know what a tough job she had wrangling all of those 36 projects. And so you can see these projects on view in libraries, municipal buildings, parks, greenways, and more, which are meant to enhance where you live and work. For 10 years, she served as the curator of modern and contemporary art at the Mint Museum in Charlotte. And she helped acquire major works for the collection, planned and originated amazing exhibitions, arranged installation of artwork in the galleries, and worked with different stakeholders, including trustees, acquisition committees, donors, lenders to exhibitions, and contemporary artists. She's a recipient of a fellowship from the National Endowment for the Arts in Policy, Planning, and Research, and has published articles about national arts policy and education. She's authored numerous books and museum catalogs, and has contributed essays to many arts publications. She's a presenter on contemporary art and artists, and has lectured at New York Schomburg Center, Miami's Lowe Art Museum, the Indianapolis Heron School of Art, and at Chicago's Harold Washington Library, among many other institutions. And the reason we invited Carla here today is because two of the exhibitions that I mentioned earlier, she actually curated. She curated Elizabeth's exhibition, Time and Terrain, from 2016 at the Blowing Rock Art and History Museum, and also A House of One Room for the Cameron Art Museum in 2021 in Wilmington, North Carolina. And they know each other so well, and she knows so much about Elizabeth's work, and it's just been fun to be around them when they're talking art. So we wanted to invite Carla here to kind of continue the conversation. So welcome. Thank you. Yeah, sorry. It's all right, because there's only one microphone. Okay, cool.
Well, thank you. This has already been a lot of fun, and as I was recalling how long Elizabeth and I have known each other, I think it's getting close to 20 years, because my daughter is turning 20 this year, and I remember when she was about 2.5, 3, toddling around the store, the Bradford store, and playing with Elizabeth's kitty, and yeah, I really got to know her when we collected the work for the Mint Museum, and I've just really been enamored with her work ever since that time, and just, you know, felt so fortunate to get to know her as a person, as an artist, and she's just such a source of strength and inspiration, so it's great to be here. So you all will see the beautiful exhibition catalog, but within the catalog, when Tyler Green was interviewing you, you talked about your sense of always being aware of the quality of light, and that had been your gift since you were a child. And I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about what it feels like to be aware of quality of light, and then also how that impacts your work, maybe even talking about what is your favorite time of day and favorite season, if there is one. So we'll pass it on to you to respond.
One of my earliest memories is being little, like 3 or 4, I guess 4, and seeing the light filter through the window, through the leaves in the oak trees in the backyard, and the shadows they cast on the bedroom wall. And I mean, I remember that. I don't remember much about being 4, but I remember that. And I remember being just about that same age and riding with my grandmother down Raymond Church Road on an October day, and the way the light looks on an October day. And I still see that same quality of light on an October day, a sunny October day, different from any other month. And I don't always exploit that quality in the work, but sometimes when I see it, I sure try to grab it. As for favorites, there are just a million favorites. Every morning, the sun rises in the east at my house, and the sunrise comes through a stand of pine trees, which are just big verticals, big tall verticals. And so I've got these, and they appear black, the light's behind them, so that these black verticals with that color rising up. And it's, every morning it's a celebration to see that. And sometimes when there's a full moon, it arcs over the house, it comes up kind of in the east, and it sets in the kind of the west. And I will get up in the middle of the night if the light's good enough and just go look at what it does to the pasture, how it casts
I love midnight shadows at midnight, such a crazy thing. So yeah, there are a lot of places that I'm sensitive to, and you probably are too.
Thank you. So obviously you've had the opportunity to live on your great-grandparents' farm. You talked about as a child that you remember it was surrounded by these 5 towering oaks, and now it still has major pecan trees out in the pasture. Do you feel like that particular sense of place gave you a sense of solidity? And if so, how did that impact your life and also your connection, your unique connection to the landscape and nature?
I never thought about it giving me solidity until you said that. But it probably is the case. It certainly was a magnet that drew me in and an irresistible kind of force. And I guess there is solidity in all those generations being in the same place, you know, loving the same place.
And then some of your paintings are elegiac, like looking, commemorating things that are lost or passing. And I asked you to put the pokeweed, the dying pokeweed painting behind us. And within the catalog, there is a wonderful essay that talks about how the composition of this painting also is very similar to a crucifix that you have from your travels to Portugal. So could you talk a little bit more about that sense of loss, capturing things that are passing, and if there's any hope for renewal, or do you see it as cycles, or is it just about things passing? Could you talk about that?
Sure. I think I started being obsessed with death when I was a little kid. It freaked me out. I didn't think that was a good idea at all. But we're stuck with it. So it's always troubled me, and I think I've been trying to reconcile myself to it, probably as you have, since I was little. And there's several paintings through my career that talked about beauty and death. My neighbor sprayed this poke with Roundup, and its first reaction was to go from being a green poke to being this crazy magenta poke. And part of it was starting to die. Well, within 2 days of this, it looked like, you know, it was horrible looking. But I caught it on the day where it was beautiful and it's dying. And I wasn't feeling so great myself at that point. I had been through a lot of stuff, and so this was a reflection on the passing of life. But yeah, I think the fact that I'm always painting nature is cyclical, it is regenerating, and yeah, I guess that's pretty incoherent, but I think it is, yeah, both fascination with death and the idea that it's a whole lot bigger than just that.
And what about the resilience of that color? I'd love you to
Yeah,
talk about
that is a very aggressive and assertive color. It's a power color. And I know the other thing about this that you might not notice. As we say, I had this crucifix with exactly the same pose going on. It's antique. I mean, he's falling apart, but his arms are outstretched. The cross is missing. It's just the figure with the Y-shaped arms. And when I wasn't feeling good and I saw this dying pope, the first thing I thought of was, oh, this is the exact same form as that crucifix. And then I noticed that around it were these grasses that literally radiated like rays of the sun out from the crucifix. So I thought, this is just too wild, too amazing a coincidence, too pointed to not talk about. I don't always know what the conclusion is to be drawn. I just lay it out there and give myself a lifetime to figure out what I meant, because I don't always know.
Yeah, I just think that this composition is really important because so many times you don't really segregate out a particular specimen. It's usually botanical or plants, tumbles of weeds, wildflowers, all in a big composition. But this particular one was really sequestered out. And the other thing that was pointed is it's also kind of a, almost a protest piece. Here's this pokeweed, it's been sprayed, but they're incredibly difficult to kill. Pokeweeds have like a gigantic taproot. They come up again and again and again, and it really does take Roundup to kill them, probably multiple doses of Roundup. And they have such a great history too. They're native to the U.S. They're stunning. We've heard of poke salad. The poor folks would be able to eat when you had nothing else to eat, even though the plant itself is poisonous. If you washed it and boiled it enough, you could eat the greens. The berries are gorgeous. They're good food for birds. People used to use it for ink.
The birds use it for ink sometimes.
Oh, yeah. If you have pokeweeds in your car in the morning, you definitely can notice, that they've been enjoying the poke. It's just, I think this is just a really important piece to talk about birth and regeneration. I see a hand over there.
Having been in the landscape business for a number of years, I would identify weeds as nothing more than a misplaced plant.
Amen.
There you go. Yes, exactly.
Absolutely.
And it's really fun to see like some of these, I guess even before the pandemic, I got obsessed with British gardening shows. And, I would notice that American pokeweed showing up in some of these super fancy gardens in England. And I thought, oh my gosh, we think this is beautiful. And I certainly have it in my yard, but, the fact that landscape designers would choose that in England is a pretty big deal. I think that, we talked a little, you jokingly when we were talking about this conversation, you said that, laughingly, that all Southern art deals with place, death, and religion. And I think anytime that you're really tied to agrarian roots, because you see that happening every year, the seeds are planted, the crop comes up, it's harvested, the fields go fallow again, and then you start all over. So, there's that sort of feeling. I think partly it's agrarian roots, but then I'm also, if you choose to get at it, what, do you tie it to any sort of connection to the mystery or to the maker? Or is there any sort of Celtic religion that is so, it's based in the land, it honors the feminine of the mystery of God? Is there anything that you care to comment about if we go that direction? Let's just go ahead and go that direction.
Yeah. I'm undeniably a spiritual person. I'm like a third-rate Christian, kind of like, not your best example. But it's undeniable I was raised in that tradition, as were all my ancestors going back about 10,000 years, or 2,000 years anyway. And so that iconography is interesting to me. I love the fact that everything about it is completely mysterious. I love the fact that though we may have genius people working in all kinds of technology and creating all kinds of artificial intelligence, absolutely no one knows what happens when we leave here. And that's really pretty neat, that it's the code we can't crack. And I like that. I mean, it's fascinating. All that stuff, I don't necessarily draw conclusions about it. I don't necessarily know anything. In fact, I don't know anything. I'm just handling these ideas and playing with them. And they're running, like a deep chord through my consciousness and my subconscious. And so there's definitely a deep spirituality. A lot of the work is very meditative. It's a very meditative practice. All day I work without language. So I don't have to, I remember having a yoga instructor who was always telling us in language to stop thinking in language, but she would be telling us in language, and I would just be like, if you be quiet, I will not think in language. but she was verbally trying to tell us not to think in language. But I don't think about it. I mean, if you're in the total right part of your brain doing art, there's no language there. It's just these ideas form without it. And I sort of got off track there, but, yeah, so there's that.
And I think some people, they want to call you, again, this is like people trying to hang down, like talking about the artist, and that you're definitely a colorist. And you are attracted to color and really communicate a lot through color. So this probably most painters do, but how do you think you arrived at that? I mean, certainly looking at your earlier work, there wasn't that vibrancy that your paintings have now. How did you evolve, and how did you become more attracted to the palette that you're using right now? And also, if you could, you talked about Neil Welliver being an artist that you really feel in simpatico with. He was in Maine, painted the landscape. He studied with Joseph Albers, so he really understood color. But you said that his work really has a feeling of the North, whereas yours has a feeling of the South, and that intense sun of the South. So that's kind of a jump off. Go ahead and talk about it from there.
I didn't really realize the difference in the coloration in the northern and southern landscapes until I did that camping trip to Lake Lala, which when I got there, I was like, oh my gosh, this is like stepping into a Neil Welliver painting, because there's a lot more darkness to my eye present in that landscape than there is here. I guess it's because there's so many alpine trees. I'm not sure why, but it's darker, and there's lots of black. And Welliver, I just loved his stuff, and I got to meet him one time. I just thought that work was so fresh, and he did it, I mean, he was out in it too. I mean, he went out into the wild and painted little pictures, kept a super limited palette, like maybe 5 colors that he only used. Whereas I try to purchase every single color that's made, and I try to absolutely use them all. So we're opposite in that way. But yeah, I always felt a kinship to him. For a long time, I painted with a real limited palette that mimics the way most people perceive nature. And I thought that if I made things colorful, it was sort of cheating. I wanted to make a picture that was beautiful, even though it wasn't wildly colorful, or that people were drawn to, in spite of its sort of limited palette. And then at some point, I just thought, why am I doing this? And it talks about it in the film. And I just thought, I'm going for color. And I started inventing colors and finding subtle, like a tree trunk might look vaguely lavender, so I would just make it lavender instead of gray or whatever. So it's been sort of a slow progress in that direction, and always trying to set myself free, always trying to cut those ropes from around myself and find a freer, newer, crazier way to get there instead of the sort of standard way of thinking. It's sort of hard to beat that mindset.
When I was thinking about you and preparing for this dialogue, I thought that one of the themes that we could talk about is, the concept of don't fence me in. You talked about, to me, that as a child, before your little brother was born, that your parents put up a fence in the backyard to keep you safe and everything, but how startling that was to you to have this boundary between you and the landscape. And then, I see like that, the self-portrait probably when you were a young mother and had so many responsibilities, and single parent, teaching full-time, trying to do your artwork, maintaining the farm, all the things, and just feeling those ropes around you and taking the big scissors. And then in a way, your art practice has always been your freedom. I mean, it's been a place where you've really been able to have solace and freedom,
Right.
and your own sense of solidity in place.
Right.
So I guess we're getting back to, sometimes I see your paintings now, it's like the tangle isn't around you, but you see the tangle in the outside. But yet you're finding, in doing all those linear forms, you're finding ways to make sense of that tangle and finding your way.
Paths
in and out and through.
Yeah.
So I find that, really remarkable and interesting about your work is, even though it is very tangled and convoluted. There are paths into the work and also out of it. And I guess from there, maybe we could talk a little bit about the perspective in your paintings, because so many of them, there's like an anti perspective, like you're not necessarily straight on with the landscape. You look at it from below, or like with your flying paintings, you look at it from above. But I think really one of the hallmarks of your work is the unusual perspective. And I know that some of it is how you place yourself in the landscape as you're kayaking, but I think also there's a major component of the intentionality of, we are part of nature, we're part of the landscape, and by not having, this position of like straight on power, one-to-one, looking at it from a lower perspective, maybe that also talks a little bit about, our place in the larger context. So that's my rambling about it, but I'm sure you have other things to say.
I think early on, I figured out that the conventional way to approach landscape was to look at it and render it. And that was boring. And it's always annoying to me, like, to see how alike landscapes can be. I mean, you can look at them and you can't tell one artist from another. They're all sort of, a lot of them are very alike, very much alike. So I think really early on, I intuited that if I took a weird point of view, it immediately altered that. It changed that formula. So real early on, I got into the being close to the ground point of view. Part of that's because there's a lot of interesting stuff down there, more than there is here. That's pretty, there's worms and roots and all kinds of stuff going on. And it might have, I hesitate to say this, but psychologically, it may have come from the point of view of being a woman and a second-class citizen, and someone who was trying to tamp herself down, keep herself quiet, be polite, not be too controversial, just, get down. That may have been an element of it, but I continue to like that point of view, and I don't feel that squashed person. I'm not that squashed person anymore. So, yeah. And the flying is an aberration. I'd say 80% of the work comes from that low point of view.
Elizabeth?
Yeah.
Something back to something you said a few minutes ago. I'm somewhat red-green colorblind, and as a child, I would use red crayons to draw grass and green ones to draw Indians or Native Americans.
Right.
And so I just never developed any confidence in my ability to name or distinguish color. But one thing that strikes me about some of the stuff that we've seen here and some of the stuff in the show is it looks to me there's a lot more blue in it than I see outside. And I wonder, is that like you said you enhance some of the tree trunks so that they're not gray but something else instead.
Right.
And some of those I think in your paintings are blue. Is that mainly your enhancements, or is it out there in nature and I just haven't noticed it?
I've had some interesting people talk to me about that. I had an interview one time, and there was a woman in the audience who was a specialist in color and in perceived color, and she talked about how there are, and then somebody sent me an article about it, there are people who have the ability to see a wider range of colors than others, and who see stuff other people don't see.
Right.
And she swore I had that. I don't know, but I will tell you that the water where I wash my brushes is always green. I mean, I use so much green that there's a lot of green. I do use a lot of blue too, but I don't perceive the blueness maybe that you do. It might be our perceptual differences as opposed to what's objectively there.
Okay, well maybe I can ask you later about some of the ones I'm saying.
Absolutely. Let's specifically talk about some.
Okay.
Yeah. I know I have, my son is colorblind, and
Which one?
Stuart. And Davey has some. I mean, he was just talking about it yesterday. But Stuart tends to love blue, and to do a lot. If he has a choice to make, it's always a blue choice. If I say pick any painting, he'll pick the blue one. You know? So, who knows what he sees through his eyes compared to what I see? I don't know. It's a mystery.
We all see color differently.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what my husband, who's also colorblind, said. I just see color differently from the way you do. I'm not colorblind.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Yeah. So we've talked about the pattern and decoration movement, which was kind of, it started in the mid-70s, went through the 80s. It was a movement, I think, that evolved as more women artists were able to break into the art realm. I mean, for so many years, women weren't even allowed to go to art school. You know, they were relegated to, you know, you could go to a place where you could learn to do like wallpaper design or fabric design, or you could teach design courses. You could teach the architects how to draw, but you couldn't really be part of the, you know, higher level of art professors at college. But in the 70s, things were starting to shift. I think, you know, that so much of the counterculture of the 60s and then feminism and everything, you know, it seemed to be, there was a trajectory that was moving forward. And artists like Miriam Shapiro, Joyce Kozloff, Judy Pfaff, Valerie Janon, they were working with Holly Solomon and really incorporating, you know, these more is more sort of compositions and incorporating like quilts and botanical work and mosaics, and really celebrating, not looking at the idea of something like a quilt or a piece of a textile piece with any sort of irony or anything to, you know, sort of, you know, I think about Robert Rauschenberg and how he incorporated the quilt in his painting and then painted on it. So, you know, there was a little bit of irony, I think, in the way he did that, but with the pattern and decoration movement, there was not a sense of irony. And there was also a look toward other cultures, you know, big Islamic cultures, African cultures, not being just so Western-minded. And then some people even say that Sanford Biggers, you know, our Sanford Biggers, you know, with his compositions, there's, you know, it's almost like a quilt. It's very, there's a decorative element to it, but yet it all comes together as a whole. So, and then, you know, interestingly, LA Luca had a show in 2020 about this. It was called Patterns of Promiscuity. And the curator was Anna Katz, and she believed that pattern and decoration really countered the modernist dictate that less is more, and then also challenged the hierarchy of Western art, that the other things that are considered craft are of lower relevance than painting or sculpture. So I guess, yeah, you know, I find this really interesting, and you know, I know that there's Laura Grosh, of course, here in Davidson, and we've talked about her maybe being part of that pattern and decoration movement. I definitely see, you know, leanings of what you're doing in that as well. So do you, I don't know, I guess if, you know, people that study art history, we're always trying to, like librarians, like, we're gonna put you in this little category, this category, or this category, which is really hard. And kind of as you said, it's like, art really isn't about language. It isn't even about, a lot of times it's not about really higher thinking, but it's communicating through form and color and line. But you're communicating, you know, your own humanness. So, I guess I've rambled, and I'm sorry that I'm not really bringing it to a closure, or I guess I don't mean, so here we are doing the feminist thing, like, oh, I'm sorry. So I'm not sorry, yeah, so I'm not sorry. So I just want to acknowledge that there was that movement. There are still remnants of that movement. I think that you carry on that movement, and there are threads, you know, in our American art trajectory where that pattern and decoration is still prevalent. And even that, some of the things that the curator Anna Katz talked about is that there are colors that are bold, flashy, sensuous, and hedonistic. their use of other materials, like you use glitter and glass. We see other artists, contemporary artists that are using that. Those more unusual, very flashy materials like McLean Thomas and other artists that we've talked about. So, yeah, do you feel, I guess I kind of feel like you're in that stream. Yeah, so what, an argument in other streams? And then also, I want to talk about Vincent van Gogh, because he was also a colorist and used a lot of lines, but he had, he had a box of yarns and threads, and he would look at those and put them against one another to really work through his composition. So there is like, I love that, you talk about weaving and textiles, weeds, water, warp and weft. As I've inverted the title, but all those W words are in your title.
Right.
So take it away from there, weave and water and warp and weft and those artists.
Well, I started thinking about how all those limbs, some of them vertical, some of them horizontal, kind of formed a mesh. Like when I look out the kitchen window, there's woods behind the kitchen, and they're so dense that they form just a solid wall. They're just, you can't see through them. They're just solid. It's all solid gray. And I think about that all the time. How many limbs does it take to create that solid fabric of gray? A lot of times when I'm painting, I started life embroidering and sewing and stuff. And sometimes I think of, oh, these are polka dots. Oh, these are stripes. Oh, this is a plaid. I think of it in terms of fabric. And you'll see some of those plaids and things in the other room. And I saw a couple of weeks ago on Instagram, one of my favorite art critics was referring to somebody's work and said, is it art or is it just craft? And I lost it. And I responded, just craft? Because there should be no line of demarcation between those two things. They are all art. They are all us being creative, and we're using different materials, okay, to do the same thing. And he responded positively, like, oh yeah, whoops, I'm sorry. But, and what was the other thread? I do think very much, I've always been hyper-conscious of pattern and decoration movement since I was a teenager, because it did run counter to what men were doing. At that time, every year, Art in America comes out with a list of every single gallery in America, every single exhibition that's taken place. And I would go through the New York galleries looking for one that had a woman in it. And I would look and look and look and look. And I might find one gallery or two that had shown one woman. It was strictly a man's game. And so I was drawn like a magnet to pattern and decoration because it embraced craft, it embraced women doing what women do and have done for generations. And Carla got this out of me when she was interviewing me several years ago. She made me remember that when I moved into the barn at the farm, I took a barn over. It was full of old junk, and we had to clean it out to make it into a studio. So when we're cleaning it out, what's in there but a spinning wheel? And I thought, good golly, how I'm so close to the person that uses spinning wheel. I knew people who knew the woman who had the spinning wheel. So it's that close. It's not 10,000 years ago, it's like 10 minutes ago. Somebody was spinning fabric, spinning fiber to make fabric, for Pete's sake. So I love that my studio used to house a spinning wheel. I just think, and I think warp and weft is very purposefully, in my mind, a way to reference women and textiles and craft. And it's mirrored, and birds' nests were the first baskets. You know, I think we borrow from the natural world in those ways.
Well, I think that wraps up my questions, and we have time for questions from the audience. So are there, and yeah.
As far as harmony in your paintings, you said you're drawn to colors and you just purchase so many colors. I have all those colors too. But I'm a relatively new artist and I'm afraid to use them. Is it, well, I mean, is it
I
hard?
relate.
Well, how do you keep a hold of harmony? in
I
your
don't really
painting?
worry about harmony much. No, here's what I do. Somebody asked me one time, how do you know what the right color is? And my answer was, I don't. I just know to seek the right color. So you go ahead and you stick your neck out and you put that crazy color in there. And then, if it doesn't work, you keep tinkering. You try a different color. And I've also discovered it doesn't matter what color you paint a thing, it matters about the color relationship. So I guess that is
Right,
harmony. I
that's-
guess
yes,
the harmony
that's my-
part is,
And I love color too.
yeah, and so try it, and then if it doesn't work, try changing the equation, try changing what's around it, you know? Yeah,
Okay.
does that make sense?
Yeah, I love that you just do color.
I do, and sometimes purple will say purple, will be on the brush, and I'm too lazy to change. So I'll paint something purple, even though it has no relationship to purple, and then I'll adapt everything around it so the purple works. Yes.
I was wondering, with all the talk about, all the talk about color, whether, synesthesia is something that you have access to in your mind and your. Not really.
I'm not no, I've read a lot about that, heard a lot about that, and it never struck a chord with me, so I don't think I have that particular
My little
quality.
granddaughter, who's 4, at one point was describing music as being colors.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's synesthesia.
That's pretty cool.
I can't claim that, sorry. Yes.
You've been making art for a long time. Do you think the fact that you are a woman has changed or affected the acceptance of your work as an artist?
I think it might have, and I think there have been times, yes. It wouldn't have done me any good to shoot for a New York gallery when there wasn't a single woman showing in New York, okay? Yeah, that would have played against me. I think that through long years, I have developed allies, many of them men, who have helped me find my path, have helped me gain traction in my career, and who have really urged me and encouraged me to keep expanding and growing and reaching. So, yeah, I think there were stumbling blocks for sure. And hopefully some of them are melting away. I don't know, what's the statistic? Museums hold like 80% male? Is it 80?
The statistic is still pretty bad.
Yeah,
Recent
80%.
studies around 80% men in collections, and even in the last couple of years, there was a study there was a research project that came out, and very few women had solo exhibitions at these major museums.
Right.
One other common follow-up though is your art considered women's art? I mean, I'm looking at it today and it's landscapes. And it doesn't look like the kind of, years ago we did portraits because that's all they could do. They weren't allowed to study the subjects that men were allowed to.
Right.
So your art itself, your subject matter is nature. Does that change or make you more acceptable as an artist or different?
I think nature, I think that's a powerful thing to talk about in your art. I think everybody automatically feels pulled to it. I think it has a magic, and a lot of us are cut off from it. I think maybe it has extra magic for people who are cut off from it. And I do think there's also some, like the butterfly thing. You can be dismissed for beauty. You can be run out of town for beauty. So to say, okay, the job of the artist is to figure out whatever those rules are and to break them, with a lot of passion.
So if the rule is it's not supposed to be beautiful, I'm gonna make it so beautiful that it's painful, that it's a problem. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from. If it's not okay to stick a butterfly in your painting because you'll be considered too feminine or something, I'm gonna put 11 butterflies in there, and you're gonna have to deal with it. So that's kind of, I have this rebellious streak, and so that's where it manifests. Any other questions? Thank you so much for being such a great audience.